Welcome to Blinkers Off with your hosts, Jared Welch and Aaron Halterman.
What is up? What is up? I'm Jared Welch. He's Aaron Halterman. It is Tuesday, October 29th, and this is Blinkers Off on Breeders' Cup Week. What's up, dude?
What is up, man? It is nice to be with everybody. It's nice to be here today. And look, we're not at the Breeders' Cup this year, but one of the many things that'll be positives about that happens today. It's like we got to leave by now. We don't have time to do special shows. We got Jon White on today, Jared. So it's very exciting that we're able to do this.
Yeah, it's like a whole different kind of thought process for me, just because I'm, like you say, it's Tuesday. Typically, we're either boarding a flight now or tomorrow. And so now it's like having everything planned out a little more. It's weird, and like I'm gonna miss it, but at the same time, it's super. Like we have so much content coming out this week. This is not the first or only Blinkers Off we're gonna do this week. It's one of many that we're gonna do this week because we're able to be here with you guys. And so, yeah, listen, Kevin, I've got the glasses on because it's a legit show. It's Breeders' Cup show. I've been studying all morning. We are ready. And listen, like the moment John was like, "Hey, you guys are up for it. I'd like to be on Blinkers Off." Like, okay, yeah, twist my arm. So we're excited to have John. Obviously, needs no introduction really, but I mean, everyone knows. I mean, not just a friend of the podcast, but a super good friend of ours personally. And so we ask him, so we might as well ask him with everybody watching, right?
That's right. Yep. I'm excited about it. We've got a ton of people here. We got a ton of people ready to rock and roll. So it's going to be awesome. This is going to be a great show. At Friday, I've got pretty much done. Saturday, still got some question marks. And we have John on to talk about, I think 4 of the 5 races we're going to talk about are Saturdays. So it's going to be exciting to see what he thinks. And look, the Derby pod, it was forever young, all day long for John. And boy, probably he should have won that one. So it was a great pod. And then, we'll see what happens here with this one today. We'll see if he's on Forever Young again.
Yeah, I think he's going to walk in kind of, with that little strut, I think, when he comes on stage. Because after last time, I think a lot of people thought, oh, man, Forever, what is this guy?
Because that's how John always walks in, right?
Yeah. Every time he's on Blinkers Off, he does, I know. Walks in with that little strut. But no, I mean, listen, it was a great pick, and unfortunately didn't cash. But maybe we'll see. I don't know. We'll see what he has in mind here. He's also, guys, big addition to this year's betting Bible. So the betting Bible is available right now. Well, with the pre-sale, it's available right now at racingdudes.com. He also was like, hey, if you guys are up for it, I'd like to have my picks in the betting Bible. So, okay, we'll add that too. So Jon White will have top 4 picks for not just the Breeders' Cup 14 races, but every race Friday and Saturday at the Breeders' Cup. So it's going to be awesome to see those in the betting Bible. You guys can get that right now at racingdudes.com on the products page. And we're shooting to have that thing, the final version, at least final version 1. Obviously, scratches and things like that can occur, and we'll update it throughout each day. But tomorrow, Wednesday, is the plan. So tomorrow, Wednesday, we're hoping to have that out. It obviously gives everybody a couple days to get it digested and then obviously get ready for Friday and Saturday racing. But anything else left, Halterman, before we hand it over to the man?
Nope, it's time to do it. And like you said, that Bible should be out tomorrow. We're getting close. Everybody will submit their picks, including Jon White, tonight. We'll put it all together and we'll have it for you tomorrow. So stay tuned for that. If you've ordered or if you're a subscriber, it will be out tomorrow. But that's it. Let's do it. No more advertisements. Let's get right to John. I'm excited.
No, Kevin. Actually, John, we're gonna really tout this as Jon White versus the Machine. That's what we're gonna do. So right, yeah. We're gonna see who can outperform who, the Machine or Jon White. So stay tuned for that. All right, guys, let's get to it. Today's show, we are going to interview Jon White, former Santa Anita, Del Mar, and Breeders' Cup. That's right, morning line oddsmaker. I think he's done. We'll talk to him about that. I think he's done like 8 Breeders' Cups. He's going to do. Obviously, we've got to add this. Now, member of the Washington Racing Hall of Fame. That's right. In my opinion, should be in the Racing Hall of Fame as well. But we'll see who gives his thoughts on the 41st annual Breeders' Cup World Championships. Who are some of John's biggest bets? His favorite long shots in the 14 races at Del Mar. We're going to find out right now. Let's go. Let's do it. Yeah, Hall of Famer. That's right. Hall of Famer Jon White. That's he actually asked me to call him that now.
You're right. Yeah. Another thing I'm sure he did. Yeah.
I'm a little nervous not to, right?
Right.
You know? All right, guys, without further ado, let's welcome in our good friend of the show, friend of us, Jon White, Hall of Famer Jon White. How's it going, John?
Doing great, guys. And of course, it was great that you guys were there for my Hall of Fame induction up at Emerald Downs earlier this year. So I thank you guys for being there. By the way, I have my Dodgers shirt on, my towel that they gave away for all of us to wave at the game the other day that I was at, Game 2 of the World Series, my very first World Series game. Couple of thank yous to begin with. First of all, I want to thank my wife, Tracy, for setting this up because I'm too inept to do this. So to be on the podcast with you guys, I want to thank her for the technological abilities to do this. You guys are very adept at that, but I am not. Want to thank our good friend, Ryan Stillman. Why do I thank him? Because if it weren't for him, I might never have met you guys.
Yep.
And so I really thank Ryan for that. Also want to mention that I think it's interesting. We've got an equipment change, an important one for the Breeders' Cup for this podcast, as we have Jared with blinkers on, or otherwise known as glasses on. So we have the glasses on or blinkers on for blinkers off. So think of that. We got the real blinkers theme going. And how about Jared subtly throwing in a Breeders' Cup contender into his opening statement as he says, yeah, this is a little different thought process. Very interesting word there, a couple of words.
Could it be a tale of what I might do in the Breeders' Cup? We don't know. We'll find out.
I don't know. By the way, you guys, you mentioned the Bible. And I wanted to mention that we're not going to talk about these races, but I want to point people to the Bible. I have long shots picked first and second in the juvenile turf. We're not going to talk about that race. I have long shots picked first and second. I have a long shot picked on top in the Filly Mare turf, right on top, a long shot. Okay. And then I have long shots picked 1, 2 in the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile, which is the final Breeders' Cup race. Makes it kind of an important race for a lot of those multi-race bets. So that's for people if they're interested in who I like, not just as favorites or probable winners, but I like these horses enough as long shots to put them first and second.
Man, I own the site and I get free access to it, and I'm excited to see it. Okay, so
I'm excited.
I can't wait to see what horses he's put in there, guys. So again, if you need any more teasing, that's it, right? You know, John's gonna have long shots galore. We are gonna talk about 5 races on the card. I asked John specifically last night. I said, hey, if there's one race you want to talk about besides obviously kind of the main ones, what do you want? And not we're going to talk about. He kind of specifically said the turf sprint, obviously Cogburn in there versus some pretty damn serious Euros. So we'll talk about that coming up. But John, let's kick right to it. Obviously the main event, and it has to be one of the bigger or maybe the most like the deepest Breeders' Cup classics we've had in recent history. With maybe you don't have the fly line, maybe you do. We talked about this last night a little bit on the live show. Like City of Troy could be, like, we don't know really for sure yet what he is until he switches over here to the dirt. But point being, there's a lot of depth in this race. And first and foremost, you're a former morning line maker. You would have made the morning line maker if had you not retired. How challenging of a line was this to make, you think?
Extremely challenging. And in fact, almost all the Breeders' Cup races are very challenging to make morning lines on. I mean, because you have usually so much depth. I mean, sometimes you get like a Torpedo Anna who's going to be a heavy favorite, but many of these, especially the turf races, generally speaking, are just wide open. Very, very difficult. And this classic really is one of the deepest I've ever seen. And I was there for the very first Breeders' Cup at Hollywood Park in 1984. I was working for the Racing Forum. I was sitting in the press box right next to the great turf rider Joe Hirsch for that Breeders' Cup card. And let me tell you guys just something about the Breeders' Cup right off the bat. Being there for that first one, first of all, it was very weird. This had never happened at a racetrack in the United States before this. that the first race on the card was at 11 o'clock in the morning. That in itself was very weird. It was the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, was the race that kicked off the Breeders' Cup. And that race was won by Chief's Crown. And I mean, that in itself was weird, but they were so afraid that this was such a new deal. They were so afraid that it might just not succeed and they might only have one Breeders' Cup. Honestly, guys, that was the thinking. This might be the only one we ever have. All these years later, from 1984 to 2024, here we are. And in fact, we have 14 Breeders' Cup races now, so many more than we had for that very first one. And this whole Breeders' Cup, from start to finish, to me, overall is the deepest in terms of even a lot of these races to where you have maybe 2-3 horses that look like the main contenders, but there's horses underneath there going way deep that have the capability to win these races. It makes it very hard for horse players in terms of, you're going to have to really have a lot of horses in a lot of these races to get coverage. That gets expensive. So you're going to have to really put your handicapping hat on and know where to draw the line, where to chop off horses. Guys, I was playing the pick six ever since 1981, my first year in Southern California. The thing about a $2 pick six that we now have again in Southern California, boy, it gets expensive so fast that it makes you have to chop off horse here, horse there to bring it down to a reasonable cost. And I can't tell you how many times that last horse I chop off the ticket ends up winning the race. You go, man, I wish I would have left that horse on. This Breeders' Cup this year, to me, is going to be a real recipe for that possibility. So, but as far as this classic, one of the things I wanted to mention right off the bat is that the way I look at it, there's 2 horses in the race, and really to me, only 2, that when all is said and done, we might say, hey, that's a superstar. Not just a star, a superstar. City of Troy is one, as you alluded to there, Jared. The other one would be Forever Young. To me, if either one of those horses wins this race, and especially if they were to win it, by daylight, 2-3 lengths or something like that, you'd have to say, wow, we just saw a superstar. Now, Fierceness, to me, if he wins it, I think he's still a really good horse. He's going to probably be horse of the year if he wins the race. And there's nothing wrong with being horse of the year, but would that make him a superstar? No, I don't think so, because he's had too many blotches on his record. So that would keep me from considering him a superstar. If Sierra Leone were to win it, is he a superstar? No. So you can go right down that list. Like even Ushba Tesoro, if he won it, is he a superstar? No, he's just a good horse to beat this field. So that way, to me, I chop it down to these 2 horses as the most likely winner in this race. Now, if you're looking for the value, Forever Young is the value at 6-1 the morning line. I would have never made him that high on the morning line. I can tell you that right now. It's not impossible he'll go favored in this. There's a chance. Now, I would have made him a pretty close price to City of Troy. The thing about Forever Young, he's got the proven dirt form that City of Troy doesn't. Now, let's talk about that, the dirt form of City of Troy, which there is none.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you guys something that I was told way back in the early 1980s. One of the greatest pleasures I've ever had in my career in racing was getting to know a guy that I consider to be the greatest trainer of all time. There's others you can consider. He would certainly be on the Mount Rushmore. There's no question about that. And that's Charlie Whittingham. And I learned so much spending mornings with him. For many years, I clocked horses with him all the time, standing right there. And he would always make me tell my time first. I had to show my hand. He'd go, "What'd you get, White? What'd you get, White?" And I'd have to tell him what time I got. But he loved my clocking ability, and especially on turf races, because in turf workouts, it gets very tricky with what they call the dogs, which are the cones out, and then trying to snap where they are in relation to the poles. So I was very good at getting good fractions in my turf workouts. So that's one of the things that kind of endeared me to the great Charlie Whittingham. But what Charlie Whittingham told me way back in the early 1980s was this, and it applies to this year's Breeders' Cup Classic. He said, John, a lot of the time, well, I'm taking a turf horse and going to try to run him on the dirt. When I run him on the dirt, oftentimes his best dirt race will be that first one. Now think of that, because how scary is that thought? That if that's true with City of Troy, that running on the dirt for the first time, so many people, guys, are looking at it as a big negative. But what if it's a positive in that he will run his best dirt race? Now, we'll never know. He's going to retire after this, so we won't get another dirt race to find out. But that has stuck with me all these years, and it's something to really keep in mind. Something else about City of Troy to keep in mind, Aaron has made an outstanding point. He made it before the Kentucky Derby. And he said that these Japanese horses, oftentimes what kills them in these races, what really hurts them is a bad start. Right, Aaron?
Yep.
And I mean, that did not help Forever Young in the Kentucky Derby right there, right out of the gate.
Yep.
So the thing about that is, with City of Troy, to show you how sharp Aidan O'Brien is and the Coolmore people, these are the guys, don't forget Aidan O'Brien, who almost beat Tisdale in the 2000 Breeders' Cup Classic. And one of the reasons I like City of Troy in this race is because City of Troy, I think, is better than Giants Causeway. But more importantly, Aidan O'Brien has said that. And look, it's not like he has said that 10 times since Giants Causeway. He has said City of Troy is the best horse I've ever trained. That's it, number one. So if that's true, let's say the bar is set for how well Giants Causeway ran in the Breeders' Cup Classic. Now, that was his dirt debut, and he had run 18 times, on a whole bunch of times on the turf before that. A difference is City of Troy's lost once. Giants Causeway lost 3 times going into the Breeders' Cup Classic. But the thing about Giants Causeway is that he got a 116 buyer speed figure in that race. And it took a 116 by Tisdale to edge him in that race. So let's say that City of Troy is better than Giants Causeway. Well, that means he's capable of running something in the 116, 115, 117. Tisdale came back the next year and beat the European Saki, and Tisdale got a 117 buyer. So what I'm saying is this is kind of a notch above these other horses that we're talking about. The Sierra Leones, the Fiercenesses, Highland Fallses, all these other type horses. They're not running 115s, 116s. Let's face it. So you put all that together. And the other thing I wanted to say about Aaron's point about the starting gate, the Coolmore people and Aidan O'Brien are so sharp that they said, Aidan went, after many years of losing races because of bad starts in the United States, he said, we got to do something about this. So they bought an American starting gate.
Yep.
And he talked recently about the difference between the two gates, how there's more space in the gate for the European horses and they feel more claustrophobic into the American gate, which is one of the reasons they don't come out as alertly. They don't have, most of these horses, like the Japan horses, don't school regularly in an American starting gate. So the fact that they took this starting gate and shipped it all the way for this kind of mini race, this practice race that City of Troy ran in, and he came out of it really good.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then they took him back on purpose because they wanted to get some of that synthetic thrown in his face as much as possible, just in case he happens to get dirt in his face here. Would it be better if that had been on dirt? Yes. But again, to show you how sharp Aidan O'Brien is, he had the people at that course in Ireland try to make it as similar to a dirt course for a synthetic course as possible. It wasn't the typical course they run the synthetic races on that course. This is the attention to detail of the Charlie Whittingham, of the D. Wayne Lucas, of the Aidan O'Brien. These great trainers, they have this eye for detail. And it's like a Bill Belichick in football, to where that guy always had his eye on these little things that seem to be little details. But when all is said and done, it's those little details that add up to a victory. So the fact that City of Troy hasn't come out of an American starting gate in a race, that's a concern. But they did the next best thing possible, and that was have him practice out of an American starting gate that they shipped all the way from their Coolmore base down to this course in Ireland for them to have this mini race. So that's the thing about City of Troy. He's got a lot going for him here that I don't think that the public, when you look at his figures, like his time form figures and that type of thing, he doesn't really seem to kind of tower over these or anything. Mm-hmm. But to me, you have to sink your teeth into either you're going to believe Aidan O'Brien or you're not. And the other thing is that he's been convinced that this horse is going to be good on the dirt. Now, his bottom side on his pedigree is more grass conducive than dirt. But of course, he's by an American Triple Crown winner, Justify, who never lost on the dirt. And the thing about him, while that bottom side of that pedigree is a concern for him on the dirt, if you watch how he strides, go back and watch that workout he had on that synthetic track, but even watch his races on the turf. He's got this really incredible, he reaches and covers so much ground, and he does it in a very comfortable and coordinated way. The late, great Charlie Hatton, who was kind of a mentor to me, even though I never met him, he forgot more about racing than all of us put together will ever know. He was the executive columnist for the Racing Forum for many years. In fact, he's the man that popularized the term Triple Crown for the Kentucky Derby, Preakness, and Belmont. It's believed that maybe it was first used by a New York Times writer, but Charlie Hatton, whether that's the case or it was Charlie Hatton who first used it, it was Hatton's constant use of that. So think of that. He's the father of the Triple Crown. And this is a guy that often talked about breeding. I learned a lot about him through that in the American racing manuals that I grew up reading at the breakfast table. And he also talked about action, or a horse's way of going, and how important that is. And City of Troy has flawless action. And barring, something untoward, which anything can happen in a race. We all know that. Think of Thunder Snow.
Exactly.
Okay, I'll bring him up. It cost me $1,000. And he's turned into a bucking bronco shortly after the start, but he would go on to win 2 Dubai World Cups. I mean, I don't think I was way off in picking him to win that Kentucky Derby and betting on him in that race. So, but that's why I say anything can happen. But barring something kind of weirdish happening, I think we'll see City of Troy. And the thing is, unlike that workout over there in Ireland, their plan is to get him out of that gate very alertly and to put him in this race, whether that's on the lead, just off the lead, but they want him up there to where he can get into this good rhythm. And I really think, the distance won't be a problem for him. That's for sure. I think he's just the class of the race.
Let's go. Okay, so to that point, let's move to a different horse, because this is a question I asked last night to Samich and Halterman. And if like we say, fierceness has been his MO, is what fierceness are we going to get today, right? He's rattled off 2 in a row. But do you think if fierceness runs his Travers race, does it matter what City of Troy does? Like, do you think his best Travers rate performance is enough to win, regardless of how well City of Troy runs?
Great question. And personally, I don't think so. For instance, if City of Troy is the horse that Aidan O'Brien says he is, would he have any trouble beating Torpedo Anna? And listen, I love Torpedo Anna, but I don't think she's like in the realm of a Giant's Causeway or a Tisnao. So no, and that's the other thing about fierceness. I'm glad you bring him up. Listen, I bet him $100 in last year's Breeders' Cup Juvenile. I threw out his Champagne, and my feeling was these connections, and this is the thing about sometimes you handicap connections as much as the numbers and the pace and all the things we consider. Listen, Rapoli and Pletcher are not idiots. And once Fierceness ran such a poor race in the Champaign. I thought for sure that, everybody wants to win the Kentucky Derby a lot more than the Breeders' Cup Juvenile. And my feeling was I expect those guys to send Fierceness to Florida, let him kind of regroup and point him for his 3-year-old campaign to take him to the Kentucky Derby. And instead, he goes to Keeneland and actually worked real well at Keeneland. And that gave him the confidence. I said, let's send him on to the Breeders' Cup. And I made him a fairly short price on the morning line. And I bet him because he was an old big price off of my morning line in that race. And of course, he ran one of the best Breeders' Cup juveniles we've seen. The thing about Fierceness, do we really think that all of a sudden he's going to win 3 in a row? Maybe. I'm not going to say it's impossible. For instance, if City of Troy doesn't like the dirt or he's overhyped or whatever. And what if Forever Young, isn't what a lot of us think he is? That makes this Breeders' Cup very winnable. In that case, I think Fierceness's Travers would probably win the race. Yeah. Really, he'd have a very good chance. So he is capable of making it 3 in a row. But my bones tell me that this horse, who has been such an in and outer, up and down. I mean, look how he drove you guys crazy in the Kentucky Derby. And I mean, I just couldn't get on board him, especially off the big win he had the time before. It is to his credit that he finally put together back-to-back wins. And it's to his credit that he held off such an outstanding filly in Torpedo Anna. I mean, he deserves a ton of credit for that. But he's not going to be a big price in this race or anything. So, and you can't have everybody. So to me, I go into this Breeders' Cup. If Fierceness wins, I don't. I mean, to me, and I do have a couple of horses besides the big two to me, which are, of course, City of Troy and Forever Young. I've got 2 price horses that I do like in this race that I think do have the capability to pull off an upset at a big price.
Well, okay. One thing I was just looking at, and then I want to get to who you like there. But with Fierceness, if you look at the buyers, yes, he rattled off 2 in a row, but anytime he's ever had hit a career high buyer, he's bounced the next time. And the Jim Dandy, he ran a great race. He ran fine. But he ran a 103 buyer. That was 3rd high. I mean, he 110 the Florida Derby and 105 in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile that you alluded to. So it is interesting. And of course, the Travers, another career high, right? And so it is another reason to kind of think, well, I wonder if he would bounce off of that kind of career effort, kind of like he did after the Florida Derby and after he did in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, of course, into the Holy Bull. But all right, let's go on. Who people are going to wonder, right? Who are the horses? If you can't play City of Troy, if you don't want to play City of Troy, if you don't believe in that he go into the dirt, if you don't believe Fierceness can do it again here, so where are you looking elsewhere for value?
Well, I've got 2 horses. The first one, I never believed I'd say this because I've never been a huge fan of this horse. I've respected him, but I've never been a big fan of this horse. I thought he's been kind of an overhyped or, over-regard, and that's Sierra Leone. And I'll tell you what has caught my attention and brought my attention to Sierra Leone. Back years ago, in 2001, I was on a local TV show here that we handicapped the Breeders' Cup races. In fact, Brad Free, the Daily Racing Forum, was on this show too. And one of the horses I picked for that Breeders' Cup was in the sprint. And I picked a horse whose trainer had a record in the Breeders' Cup of 0 for 38. Now that takes a little bit of guts to go ahead and be picking a horse like that. But I really liked him in this race. And we as handicappers, sometimes when you're looking at a horse's past performances, if you do the trick of like circling what is important sometimes, it can really point out a horse that's going to be a good price, a bigger price than it should be. And that horse in 2001 was Squirtle Squirt. Now, Squirtle Squirt was a very good 2-year-old, but then he got injured. And after he got injured, they sent him to Bobby Frankel. And for Bobby Frankel, this horse started 5 times in 2001 going into the Breeders' Cup. Now, he only won a couple of those 5, but the trick was many of those races were at 7 furlongs. And as we know, the Breeders' Cup sprints at 6 furlongs. So if you went through his past performances, which I printed out just to do it again to refresh my memory, but if you pointed out where he was at the 6 furlong mark in all those 5 races, he was first every time. So in other words, here's a horse who had been in front at the 6 furlong mark in every single race that year. And what he did was he goes off at a nice price at the Breeders' Cup, and he ends this, the call.
That's
I think we've lost him.
What a perfect way for that thing to. I gotta grab that screen grab.
Yeah, we've totally lost him. Here, let's take him off.
Let's remove him for a
Yeah,
second.
let's remove
That's
him for a
hilarious.
second. That's pretty good. Yeah, looks like he'll need to reload here, and then we'll be good. Yeah, as we're waiting for him, I got to tell you, it's scary because I kind of had the same feeling as him on the Classic. Like last time I was handicapping, I said I'm going to go Forever Young or I'm going to go City of Troy. Now I think we're flipped. I think he has City of Troy on top. I have Forever Young. But it's crazy. And then the first horse he talks about, Sierra Leone. Dude, Sierra Leone's the horse I keep going back to and saying, look, this horse can finish third at a bigger price than what he should be. So,
dude, it's just like we talked about last night. I mentioned Sierra Leone because it's just a horse that, like, if he were to win, you'd be like, it's not like, I mean, yeah, he got beat by Fierceness, yeah, but he's been right there. He kind of runs his race, and like if he were to finally put it together in one of these big ones, it would kill you that it didn't, that you didn't use him. So I don't know that I have the stones to put him on top, but he's certainly growing in interest.
yeah, looks like we've got John back. John, you ready? Okay, you were good. Go ahead, John.
Uh-oh.
We don't hear him. Do you hear us? He might be on mute somehow. We do see him. Can't hear him.
We see you.
Yeah.
He can't hear you, though.
Here, we'll take him out for just a second, maybe, and bring him back. There we go.
That's a screenshot that you guys don't like. We're in a group chat with him and Ryan, and that's a screen grab we will be using forever.
Yeah, forever. Okay, let's see if we want to test it again.
You go for it. Maybe you click it.
Okay, John, you hear us? No.
Oh, no.
Doesn't hear us?
Can't hear us?
I guess not. No.
Well, okay.
We may have to get John's notes and just read them.
I mean, he's going to leave everybody on the edge of the seat because he got Sierra Leone, but who's the other one?
Tracy said he sees himself on the screen, but no sound.
Okay.
That's interesting. Maybe
get out of it and do it again. We will get John back here. I don't know what happened. It's obviously his audio was fine.
Yeah, no, he was doing fine, and I think maybe the internet cut out or whatever. Because you could hear him fine. Everything was good. He wasn't fuzzy or anything, and then boom, he was gone. So we'll get him back though. Don't worry. It'll get back. That once. Try again. Okay, so they're gonna try it again, and then we will see what happens here as we get him back. But yeah, like I said, very scary because we're seeing this. We're definitely seeing this the same right now.
Yeah. Like I said, he is the ultimate. He's a good key horse for sure underneath. Because he's about as true as they come when it comes to he maybe sometimes not always gonna get there, but he runs his race every time. Whether he's been running all the big ones, and obviously you say if you love Fierceness or you think Fierceness has a shot, well, I mean he's ran second or third behind him every time. So Damn near won the Derby.
Mhm.
Of course, Forever Young. People love him in this race, and he outfinished him. Whether however you want to argue how that went down, but still. So when you look at the two, you're getting double the price on Sierra Leone. The only difference is he doesn't like to win.
All right, John's back. John, you can hear us this time?
I do, you guys.
Oh.
By the way, right off the bat, this reminds me of when I first went into television at Santa Anita, left the Daily Racing Form in 1993. We had the Breeders' Cup at Santa Anita that year. I thought that it would be a good idea going into television to my co-hosts that I would be joining, Kurt Hoover. I called them up. I said, let's have dinner. We had dinner at a Black Angus that we dudes, I ate with you dudes after a Breeders' Cup a couple of times. We had dinners at. Unfortunately, after COVID, that's closed. But the reason I wanted to have that dinner with Kurt was to pick his brain. And I can tell you the very first, we got our glasses of wine. And the very first question that I asked him was, Kurt, what do I need to know going into television? And I will tell you his answer. He said, John, be ready for anything at any time. He said, be ready for technical difficulties. And I'm telling you, what great advice, because that helped me throughout my entire broadcasting career. And by the way, that 1993 Breeders' Cup, you look at FanDuel today, they got like 20 producers and 20 commentators and everything. Kurt Hoover and I did the entire simulcast signal program from Santa Anita, including the Breeders' Cup races. It was NBC and our coverage. And when I say our coverage, two people, not one producer. I basically produced it. I pulled out videos and so forth. But that entire card, I wish I had a videotape of that, because I'm very proud that without all what goes into these broadcasts today, that two people did that entire Breeders' Cup card from start to finish at Santa Anita that day. So, but to get back to Sierra Leone, what do I like about him? Chad Brown said something, and again, what you have to do as a horse player or even as a fan, listen to what these people say, and then you judge for yourself. You say, oh, that guy, there's certain trainers that will say, I like this horse. For instance, my wife came home one day and said, Mel Studi says that he loves Very Subtle in the sprint. I said, well, that's nice, but Mel Studi loves every horse he runs. He never doesn't like, it would mean more to me if she said, he doesn't like Very Subtle. So I said, she's not beating Groovy. Groovy was like a 1-5, 2-5 favorite that day. And I called that chart. So if you go back to look at the official chart for that race, those are my margins. That's my comments underneath the chart. But as they're coming down the stretch and Very Subtle is drawing off to win, convincingly, I'm thinking, boy, am I going to hear about this when I get home. And of course I did. My wife, maybe will bet $2 a year, or twice a year. And that was one of her $2 bets that day. I don't remember what Very Subtle paid, but it was a lot. She paid a lot that day. So that's the thing about, these guys. So you have to evaluate, though, what these guys say. And the thing about Chad Brown is he said, I really don't think, and I love the fact he didn't make a big deal about this, too. He just kind of mentioned it. But he says, I don't think Sierra Leone really likes the track at Saratoga that much. So if you go and look at his record and do what I did with Squirtle Squirt, and you just look at his form away from Saratoga, well, he's got 3 wins and 2 losses. The 2 losses are each by a whisker, and one of them's the Kentucky Derby. So what I'm saying is, since he's not running at Saratoga this time, there is a chance that we're going to see Sierra Leone maybe run better. He did get a big buyer in the Travers. So, it's not like he's run bad at Saratoga, but I think there could be something to this, that's not his favorite track. Now, maybe he won't like Del Mar either. But the point is, this time, look at Sierra Leone's been the chalk in most of his races. And this time he's 12-1 in the morning line. So that's the key with him. He's, to me, live at the price he's going to be. And the horse that I think is live too, and is an even bigger price on the morning line than Sierra Leone, is Highland Falls. And Brad Cox, the way he's talking, and here's another guy. Now he can tend to be a little more optimistic. So you got to kind of take him with a little more grain of salt than some trainers. But boy, I get the feeling he really feels Highland Falls is primed to run a big race here. And look, they were high on this horse earlier this year. They sent him to Santa Anita, and I thought he had a shot in the Santa Anita handicap. And he just wasn't ready to travel and run in a race that tough at that time. But that last race shows, I think he's taken his game to a higher level. I would have never made him 20-1. I don't know what price he'll be, but I'll tell you what, he is live at whatever price he's going to be. So to me, like playing an exotic, multi-race exotic with the classic, which, you know, people have complained about it not being the last race, but by where it is in mid-card, there's a lot of multi-races, exotics you can tie up with the classic now. So it gives you, you know, more opportunities. And I think in this classic, I certainly, I mean, you could, I would be tempted to single City of Troy, like on one ticket and spread elsewhere. But I would also have a backup ticket for sure that would include City of Troy, Forever Young, Sierra Leone, and Highland Falls. Now, the other horse that I think we all need to talk about, you guys have been talking about him forever, is Next. Now, the poor guy didn't, you know, do well at the draw. And by the way, one thing about the Breeders' Cup that I learned that in the last two of them I had to do, you have to submit your morning lines before the draw, which here are the most important races along with the Triple Crown that we have in the country. I think that does a disservice to the bettors, but they love it that you know, it comes out right away. And the thing about Next is, I think a good parallel for him. And listen, guys, I was going to come on here and really talk him down and say, I can't see any way he's going to win and forget it and whatever. I'll tell you what, I'm not that strong against him now. I mean, and I'm kind of rooting for him too. It's such a great story. And look, his numbers aren't that bad. But one thing you've got to ask yourself, Aaron, Jared, would Highland Falls beat those horses like he was? I mean, as far as like if those were 1.25 mile races, wouldn't Highland Falls beat those horses by 10, 15, 20 lengths?
Yep.
Or fierceness?
Yep.
But, you know, you can't hold it against him. He's only burying whoever he's running against. But class will tell. One of the real lessons my father taught me clear back into the 1960s, the late 60s, at the track in my hometown that we grew up at, Playfair Racecourse, which was a 5/8 oval. We had the Playfair Mile late in the season. It was a week before closing weekend. And it was the big race of the meet for older horses. And once in a while, the Playfair Mile winner would come back a week later in the Inland Empire Marathon at 2 miles. And the thing about that was that people would bet the marathon horses as strongly or sometimes even more strongly than the Playfair Mile winner, who was running against tremendously tougher horses in the Playfair Mile in those races than these marathon horses that were running in marathon races up to the 2 mile race. And by the way, how fun was it to watch those horses run around that 5/8 oval in a 2 mile race? They went around and around, and more than once I saw a jockey think he'd won it, stand up, and then realize he had a lap to go. And by the way, my dad once made a very good observation about that. He said, you know, John, when a jockey does that, they're not like misjudging the finish like this happened the other day in New York, or in Kentucky at Keeneland, where the guy, you know, reached the first finish line and there was a second finish line. I saw Pink Eye do that at Hollywood Park when they put in a second finish line when they expanded the track to have the Breeders' Cup. And I once saw one of the greatest riders, if not the greatest rider, misjudge a race standing up at the first finish line and then realize and have to go to the second finish line. But my dad pointed out, he said, John, when these jockeys misjudge this in this 2-mile race, they're misjudging the race by 5 furlongs. And that was really a good point. And those jockeys would try to use tricks. They would take little peas and put them in the mouth and spit one out for each lap. And they would try to tie their reins. And, you know, we had a marathon race when I was a steward at Boise. And knowing that this can happen, I went down to the jockey's room before the race and emphasized to these guys how many laps they were going to have to take. So, and I know it can be tough on a jockey sometimes to count up to 3 or 4 or 5, you know, but, you know, I wanted to make sure that they were aware of how many laps they were going to have to do. The thing about Next is, I think he fits and believe me, I made some great bets on these Playfair Mile winners coming back in the 2-mile. Every opportunity I got to do that. I mean, sometimes you'd get a $10 payoff on a horse that should have been even money because people are going, well, he's not a marathoner. Well, no, he's not, but he's tons the best horse in the race. Now, Next is not tons the best in this race. And the thing about Next, when you talk about class, and that's where I'm saying Next would be the marathon horse versus the Playfair Mile winner. So it's the class horses like the Highland Fallses and the Sierra Leones and the Fiercenesses and the City of Troys and the Forever Youngs versus a marathon horse. So I have a lot of back experience about this, and usually class will tell. And there was an example of this last weekend in football. You had Navy, who was 5-0, playing Notre Dame. And believe me, at first I thought, you know, maybe Navy, they're having a great year. Maybe they can give Notre Dame a battle. And then the closer I looked at it, listen, Navy in their 5 games that they had won going into Notre Dame, they had scored 49, 38, 56, 41, and 51. But the problem was they were playing Bucknell, Temple, Memphis, UAB, and Air Force.
Yeah.
So when they stepped up in class and played Notre Dame, how much did they score? 14.
Right.
See, that's kind of what I think we're dealing with next year. So while I think it'd be great if he won, I can't say he can't win because he's just running too good. But he's another one. If he wins, I mean, I can't put him on any tickets or anything like that. I mean, I just think he's stepping into much deeper water here against these.
Well, there's no doubt this is a race where you're going to have to take a stand against the Next, take a stand against the Fierceness, because you can't play them all. And there are so many good horses, like you pointed out. Now, let's go to a race where that may not be the case, and you might be able to go a little bit shorter. Let's go to the Distaff, which now, John, seems to me to be a 2-horse race between the Japan Superstar, awesome result, and our superstar, Torpedo Anna. What are your thoughts on the Distaff?
Well, I tried to come up with a way to beat Torpedo Anna. For one reason is I think she's had a very rigorous campaign. Mm-hmm. And when you get a filly or mare at the end of a rigorous campaign, they are vulnerable. I mean, I don't care how great they are. I mean, they are vulnerable. And she, to me, has shown signs of that. And then, you know, I've never felt Kenny McPeak. I think the guy's a tremendous trainer. Look at his historic achievement this year to win the Kentucky Derby with Mystic Dan and the Oaks with Torpedo Anna. I mean, that's phenomenal. But I just have never been one to I like him more at 5-1 than at 1-5. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's just,
sure,
you know, the way I feel about him. So that alone made me really look to try to beat her. And I can't do it because I think she can win this probably with her B game. But that's dangerous. So again, if you're betting the race, would you single her? Well, if you're trying to save money, yes. But you said probably a 2-horse race. And look, this awesome result, you have to give a lot of respect to. I mean, I just don't quite have the guts to pick her against Torpedo Anna. But this is a filly that brings a lot to the table here. 7 for 7. And the race she just won is the race that March Lorraine won before she pulled off the 49-1 upset at Del Mar and became the first Japanese-based horse to win a Breeders' Cup race. And of course, later in the day, or at that same Breeders' Cup, Love's Only You won for Japan. And by the way, the trainer of March Lorraine and Loves Only You, the trainer of Forever Young, which is one of the reasons I liked him in the Kentucky Derby, because that guy is a great trainer. So that's another thing that Awesome Result has in terms of coming off that win in Japan, like March Lorraine did. Now, the thing about Awesome Result is that she has a very top trainer too. This is a guy that trained a horse called Ofavra. And I had the pleasure to see him run in the Japan Cup. How good was Ofavra? He won $19 million. And the filly that beat him by a nose in the Japan Cup was Gentle Donna. And in her career, she made $18 million. But this Ofavra was a tremendous horse. He'd finished second in the ARC going into the Japan Cup that I was there for and got a horrible ride by Sulian and should have won that ARC. And that's a race Japan is coveted. They want to win that race more than the Kentucky Derby or more than a Breeders' Cup. And then Ofavra came back and ran well and lost in the ARC again next year. But what I'm saying is this is another plus for this Awesome Result is she has a tremendous trainer, a perfect record, and she's a Justify. So here we go again. That here Justify to me, won't be impossible if we get to the end of the Breeders' Cup this year and we say Justify sired the winner of the Distaff and the Classic. It could happen. So, there's a lot to like there. I came so close to going with her, but I just can't quite pull the trigger. But she's certainly going to be a much better price than Torpedo Anna. Torpedo Anna is going to be, bet to oblivion. And like I say, I do feel that Torpedo Anna doesn't have to run the best race of her career probably to win this race. That's the key to me about her, is that she has a little wiggle room there. So I don't know. I think, Aaron, you said it, because once you get past these two, I'm just not really on board with anybody else. It's the one Breeders' Cup that is shallow. There isn't real depth to this race.
No, and the more I've watched, I almost need to stop watching replays and handicapping this race, because the more I do, the more I like Awesome Result. And I'm like you, I really don't want to, because I really like Torpedo Anna. And she's had a hell of a year, and obviously just kind of become a real big fan of her. But man, it's Awesome Results. She looks the part. She's big looking, mare. She looks really good, and the way she runs, she's 7 for 7, 3 for 3 at the distance. She's running long races, longer than this even over there. So it's like, I'm not a huge Raging Sea fan as far as winning here. So to me, it's one of those two. I just think the class will get to. Now, I want to ask you before, would you have considered Idiomatic if she wouldn't have scratched here, or were you still like a Torpedo Anna?
I'm glad you said that. I was licking my chops to bet Idiomatic here. And the fact that Cox said after they announced she was retired, and this is how quickly things can change racing, as we know, from one day to the next. Charlie Whittingham said that these horses can, spoil like strawberries overnight. I mean, and that Cox said what was particularly disappointing about Idiomatic here was the fact that he said she was doing better than ever coming into this. I mean, and that last race to me really showed it. And she was coming in on the upswing, whereas I think Torpedo Anna is coming in on the downswing somewhat. So that, like I say, is a concern. That Torpedo Anna ran such a gutty race in that Travers that they came back and had to run another gutty one. So, like I say, I think she's vulnerable, but I just can't quite get to Awesome Result. I mean, I really want to, but I in the final analysis, I just would feel more stupid if I went with Awesome Result and watched Torpedo Anna win than the other way around. Sometimes you just try not to look stupid.
Yep. I try every day. It's hard, but I try.
Yeah, how does that work out? I'd like to know.
It hasn't worked well for me, but
all right, let's flip on over here, guys, to the next big one, which is we're gonna go to race number 7 on the Saturday card, which is the Breeders' Cup Turf. Just a hell of a race, $5 million race, 1.5 miles on the turf. Rebels Romance, who's won this race 2 years ago, won this race before, so we know we can do it. But I want to first, and I don't want to go back to the classic really, but at least say this: like, what if City of Troy, which definitely could have ran here, right? That would have been the MO for Aiden O'Brien to bring City of Troy. It's a $5 million race. It's not like it's that, $2 million difference, but still, certainly a huge race to win. He could have ran here. The horse would have been what, John? Like 6-5? Like,
I right in there, even money, 6-5, maybe even 4. He would have stood out by a mile because I think Emily Upjohn would have been favored here if they'd gone with her, and they decided to go with her here, and she's not the favorite. But against Emily Upjohn, I think City of Troy, even though it's a big field, which has a lot to do with the odds. I think he would have been a very strong favorite. You're right here. But the thing you got to be careful of here a little bit is this. Coolmore is in the stallion business. And one reason they're looking at this dirt race for City of Troy, it's going to make him exponentially a more valuable stallion if he's got a big dirt win on his resume, being by Justify. And he would not add to his stallion value by winning the Breeders' Cup Turf. Winning the Epsom Derby and races like that have helped his value. This wouldn't do anything really it'd help a little, but not like winning the Breeders' Cup Classic would for him at stud. So that has a lot to do with why they've been interested. And plus, we all have our goals in life, things that we want to win if at all possible at some point. For instance, it was a goal of mine to win the fantasy league with the dudes as a partner with Ryan. And we were able to accomplish that. So we got that off our bucket list. And one thing about Aiden O'Brien, ever since he lost that race back with Giants Causeway, he's wanted to win a Breeders' Cup Classic. It's something that's kind of a hole in his resume. And he's accomplished so much. And that's one thing he has yet to do. So he wants to do it. So you have these kind of other reasons besides just the fact they're trying to win a Breeders' Cup race. If you went to Aiden O'Brien and Coolmore and said, it's very important for whatever reason that you guys win a Breeders' Cup race, this year, they would say, or what, we die?
Right.
And they say, yeah, you'd all die. They'd say, put City of Troy in the turf.
Right.
So, like I say, there is that aspect to this, but sometimes when you lose the big favorite like that, it turns it into in fact, most of the time, it turns it into a much better betting race.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. And so when you look at this race, John, do you now, it's not like Rebels Romance is a legit horse.
Yes,
obviously he won this race. So when you look at it, do you think there is, just because he has struggled a little bit, he got back to form a little bit last time out, but he struggled from the time over here after he won that Breeders' Cup. He had those races where it was like, what the hell happened? And then once he's gotten back overseas, he's kind of regained his form a little bit. Do you think that 5-2 is fair, or are you going to try to beat him with somebody?
Well, I'm going to try to beat him. But listen, I have a ton of respect for him. Listen, this is a horse. He went off form last year. He had the mishap. I seeded the rider. It messed with him, I think, mentally. People don't understand the mental aspect of horses. That's one of the things that kind of can come in with a fierceness. These aren't machines, and they have their quirks. And the proof of that is this horse, as good as he is, it just messed him up. It threw him off track. Yeah. But when you have a great trainer like Charlie Appleby, they're good at getting a horse back on track, which he has done. His race in Dubai this year was fabulous, maybe the best of his career.
Yep.
Now his Breeders' Cup, was good, but I don't think that was one of the stronger Breeders' Cup. I think this one's actually a bit tougher. But listen, you start with him, and I just think he's not one that I would just immediately pick at 5-2 or 3-1. But I can't argue with anybody picking him. I can't argue with anybody betting him. And certainly, if you leave him off your ticket on a multi-race deal, you very well be sorry. But to me, There's two I like better than him here. One of them is Emily Upjohn. First of all, you've got one of the greatest trainers in the history of thoroughbred racing, a guy that I got to know very, very well in California in the early 1980s. And I mean, I became good friends with him. Even went to a charades party at his house once.
One of my favorite stories.
That was one of the most memorable parties I've ever been at. This Englishman can throw a party, let me tell you. But he can also train. He won the first Breeders' Cup mile with Royal Heroin, who drilled the boys and broke the course record that day. And Woody Stevens had broken the course record the day before with Sabin, who was the big turf star, female turf star from the East. And then they had a showdown in the Matriarch that year, and Royal Heroin won that one too. And Rainbethilde, who I had seen run in France at my only arc, and Rainbethilde was on the undercard that day, finished second in the Matriarch, and finishing third was Sabin. So Royal Heroin locked up the Eclipse Award that year. But Gosden won a Santa Anita handicap with Bates Motel, who was bigger than Zenyatta. He was a tank and just a really talented horse. But this guy has gone on to England and proven. I mean, look at Enable last year. I mean, Inspirl. This guy, he's just a fabulous trainer. And I was so shocked when he didn't, especially since they had Emily Upjohn first preference for the Filly Mare Turf. That's where I expected her to go.
Yeah.
But then I read where he's saying that even though that was her first preference, his first preference really is the turf. First of all, because I think he sees it as winnable for Emily Upjohn. And listen, she's been far from a win machine this year, to say the least. But she's been running some very, very good races against some very, very tough competition. And Gosden knows what kind of ground she would prefer. And the reason he's opting for the turf is that the layout of the course is she's better suited to a 1.5 mile race than a 1 3/8 race at Del Mar. Again, he's forgotten more about racing and training and everything else than I'll ever know. So I defer to him. And the fact that this guy is running her in this race is such a huge endorsement to me when he could have run her in the Filly Mare Turf. And I think she would have been a pretty strong favorite and very tough to beat. So the fact he's got her here instead of the Filly Mare Turf just speaks volumes to me. The other horse in here is this JRB. And this is a horse with a trainer, Meehan, who's won the Breeders' Cup Turf twice. And this is an up-and-coming 3-year-old. And up-and-coming 3-year-olds from Europe have done very well in this race in recent years. I think the ground is going to be very good for this horse. Again, he's held his own against some tough competition. In fact, in his win in France in the Prix d'Alors, he defeated a couple of really highly regarded horses that came back. And one of them won the big race on British Champions Day, beating the likes of Economics and horses like that. And for instance, Economics, if he was in here, he'd be about 6-5. So that horse, he's an up-and-comer. He's going to like the ground. He's got a trainer. This horse, I think, is tactical. There's not a lot of speed in here either. You'll see Cabo Spirit probably go to the front, but I don't think he's got the class to wire the field. You know, I bet on him last time at Santa Anita. I thought he had a good chance to wire the field, and he did. So that was good. But that field he beat there is nothing compared to this field. It's night and day. So even though he might have a pace advantage, he doesn't have the class to take him all the way. And I think Emily Upjohn is, and here's another thing about Emily Upjohn. I liked her before I found this out. This is the icing on the cake. Frankie Dettori. She's reunited with Frankie Dettori. And I think he fits her to a T. If you look at how she has run for him, and I'm told she's a tricky one to ride. She's got kind of a quirky one. And Dettori has got the key to unlock her. And so I think that's another huge plus for Emily Upjohn. So Emily Upjohn and JRB, I think, are both very, very good candidates to try to knock off Rebel's Romance. And then one at a bit of a price is the horse that ran third in this race last year, Sharigar, from Japan at 10-1. And here's something to keep in mind about him. When he ran third in this race last year, and remember who won it, Auguste Rodin, who
Sure.
is a
Really good.
top horse. I mean, well, this horse ran third that day and didn't have the best of trips, but more than that, he was coming off a horrible performance. And what had happened is after that, he had a throat operation. So last year, he came into the race far from, optimum conditions. This year, they're able to bring him into the race more to their liking. So he's live at 10-1 in this race too. But I really like Emily Upjohn, and I really like JRB in this race as horses that are better prices to win the race than Rebels Romance.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's similar to the city of Troy in a sense that Emily. I mean, listen, we're like Goddess at 5-2, and the Philly Mare is like okay, like they're not going to be afraid of her. And the fact that I was licking my chops for Emily Upjohn in that race. Then when they opted for this, that's surprising. So that one, and then there's the other one, the 10 Wingspan, another one, another Philly, 3-year-old
right.
Philly for Aiden O'Brien that I thought might be in that race as well, who's entered here. So, two horses there that I thought would have been really good plays in that race that are opting to run here, which tells you a lot about what they think. Anytime you have those kind of horses against on the turf and bring those kind of trainers, I should say, that bring they're incredibly live. I love Emily Upjohn, especially the name, right? The Upjohn. That's
perfect, right?
yeah. But I do think this is a tough one. This is this sequence is we talked about this last time a little bit. This pick 5. I mean, you want to do the pick 6 as well, but the pick 5 that kicks off with the Classic, it only gets tougher, right? It really does. And this is one of those legs that it's you almost feel like you have to make that opinion of, listen, I just think it's John Gostin. I just don't, and maybe Appleby or whatever, and that's it. And if I get beat, if it's one of those Aiden O'Brien's, which good luck maybe figuring out if it's Luxembourg or if it's Wingspan or whatever, then I got beat. But it's a tough one to kind of, you almost have to go thin or go really deep here.
And don't count out Luxembourg. I think he's live in here too. I do. He's another one that it wouldn't shock me if he runs a really good race here. How'd you see this, Aaron?
It's weird, John. Through 3 races, we've kind of been spot on. We haven't had the same horses in the right. We've had the same horses, maybe a little bit different order. The 4 you talked about were the 4 that I'm leaning towards as well. And I haven't quite decided. That's a decision for a couple hours from now when I'm back working on the Bible, exactly how I'm going to order them. But I think JRB at this point, I probably have on top. I really like JRB quite a lot. So it's a hell of a race. And it always is, though. This is the one we can always count on, the international flavor, coming in and really being strong. And, we didn't even mention Farbridge. He's been really nice the last 2 races.
You can't throw him out.
Yeah.
I'm telling
Yep.
Listen, people knock the American horses in a race like this, the turf, but I would not knock him at all. I think he is. I certainly would not. In other words, in a multi-race, I'd have him on the ticket too. There's no question about it. By the way, one thing about this race, sometimes we just get these kind of silly things that, why we like a horse or whatever. But when I was growing up, the top 40 radio station in my hometown, Spokane, was KJRB. And I mean, I listened to them practically 24 hours a day. I like the disc jockeys and I like the music and everything. And they often refer to themselves as JRB. So when there's a horse that comes along called JRB, it's almost made to order for me. I'm telling you, I mean, it's just kind of one of those real weird deals. Most people, I mean, I got to be the only guy on the planet that would associate my top 40 radio station from the 60s and 70s to a horse running in the Breeders' Cup turf.
I could have just made my decision for me. It feels like it's meant to be now for me to pick that horse since I've got him on top currently. Like if the Bible came out right now, he'd be the pick. So maybe I should.
And it rhymes. JRB, it was meant to be.
That's right. Yeah, that is right as well. So
I guess we'll see. But let's go on to race.
By the way, before you go on, folks, if you're listening to this right now, this is exactly how we are when we're off the camera. This is the same stupid stuff that we come up with. So anyway, I just thought of that. We were sitting there talking. I was like, I feel like we're at like Matt Denny's or Emerald Downs right now. But
Yep.
It's exactly
Video.
our conversations, our text conversations are when we were together, how they
Yep.
go. We just happen to be with people on here tuning in, watching us, basically. So
Yeah.
it's great to, John is exactly the John that you guys
Yes.
you see here. All right, let's go to
Yep.
the one race that John did want to make sure we mentioned on this show. So let's get his input. This is race 5. First, one of the first, I guess race 4 is the first Breeders' Cup race, but second Breeders' Cup race of the day. And you've got the Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. And again, 5 furlong, $1 million race. But, this is such an interesting race because you've got Cogburn, who's the shortest price of the weekend at 7 to 5 on the morning line. And honestly, probably deserves to be. But, man, Brad Sell coming in here drawn to the outside. He is a serious threat. I'm interested to see because it is definitely feels like it's Cogburn or it's one of these Euros.
Well, one thing about you guys, and I'm glad you brought up what you did, Aaron, is that when we go to the races or we go to the restaurant or bar after the races, we have fun.
Yep.
And sometimes people get so involved in racing that they forget, let's have some fun.
Yep.
That's one thing they knock about Bob Baffert, but that's one thing his owners really enjoy. Yes, it's serious. And yes, there's a lot of money at stake. And yes, we want to win our bets. And yes, it's work to handicap and so forth, but you can have some fun too. And that's one thing I think that you guys bring to the table every week with Blinkers Off. You guys inject a little fun, but you're not, get off like in the early days of TVG, they were so goofy, it just made you want to turn it off. I mean, you can go over the line too. So, and the key is to have a lot of substance in addition to having some fun. So, but the thing about this race is Cogburn would have been the heaviest favorite if Idiomatic hadn't not gone in the distaff, but now Torpedo Anna at 4 to 5 on the morning line, which is correct. She's going to be odds on probably shorter than 4 to 5. Actually, I would have made her shorter than 4 to 5. I can tell you that too. But this horse would have been the heaviest. And listen, one of the things I did with my expressbet.com column for 20 years, when I made Breeders' Cup selections, I came up with price plays, and I also came up with my most probable winner. And my most probable winners won like 85% of the time, maybe 90. It's very high. Mm-hmm. And at this year's Breeders' Cup, I would not have Torpedo Anna as my most probable winner. My most probable winner is Cogburn.
Yeah.
And that's saying into the teeth of Brad Sell and these other horses that, look, they're not chopped liver, they're good horses. But this horse has been like a freak. And to me, and here again, when you know a trainer and you've followed him for years, like Steve Asmussen, you learn that when he talks about this horse like it's the Michael Jordan of turf sprinters. Mm-hmm. I mean, not just like he's good or whatever. I mean, and look, that one race he ran this year, it's still to me the best performance I've seen by a horse this year in this country. I mean, when you run 5.5 furlongs as fast as that horse did that day and did it the way he did it. I mean, you guys were there for that, right?
Yes.
My
jaw hit the ground.
Yeah,
I was so impressed.
Live, I mean, that's, I mean, my jaw was dropping watching it on TV. I mean, I'm telling you, this is just, Golden Pal's been the best turf sprinter I've seen till him. And to me, this is the best turf sprinter I've ever seen. I mean, bar none. Now, listen, Brad Sell is a very good horse. And if Cogburn, we get back to what if he breaks horribly or something, and then got in traffic or something. But listen, one thing I love about Cogburn, he's come from way behind and won. You watch his turf win at Lone Star Park. I mean, he came from the clouds that day. I mean, and he's shown he can sit off the lead. I mean, or he can just go right to the front. So, I mean, that versatility is key too, to me. What makes him why I trust him. In making my most probable winner, I try to go with the horse I trust the most to win. And I don't trust Torpedo Anna because of what I was saying. I think she's at the end of a rigorous campaign. Cogburn is fresh. It seems to be coming into this just as Steve Asmussen wants him to.
Mm-hmm.
And if somebody can beat him under these conditions, I'm wrong, but I just don't see it. I'm sorry. This horse to me is clearly the most probable winner. I have no problem singling him. I'll sink or swim with him, and that's fine. Now, obviously the horse to beat is Brad Sell. And right off the bat, why do you have to respect him? Look what he's just carried in his last 3 races. We don't even see this anymore in the United States by any stretch. 137, 132, 139. Holy mackerel. He's carrying the grandstand. And he's running well. So now, one thing about this horse going against Cogburn, Brad Sell has never raced around a turn. So you're going to run against a horse that I think is the best turf sprinter maybe in history, and at least the best one I've ever seen, and you're going to beat him in your first time around a turn? Maybe. I mean, again, I wouldn't say it's impossible because Brad Sell's that good. He is really, really good. I just think he picked the wrong Breeders' Cup turf sprint to be in here, and they've been pointing for this forever. And listen, I think he's the main threat to Cogburn, but I don't need to double my ticket, or I don't, whatever. Like I say, now, if we do happen to get into some kind of a pace meltdown, I think Notorious is very interesting. Don't forget, he was the favorite in this race last year at Santa Anita. And he loves this Del Mar turf course. So, and he's going to be a bit of a price in here. So I think he's one that for your underneath. Now we're talking about and I'm not an underneath bettor. Because I grew up betting the daily double. They didn't even have the exacta when I was first in racing. And so I'm more used to like the double, pick 3s, pick 4s, pick 5, pick 6. But people that bet exactas, trifectas, superfectas, high fives, certainly you're looking at those underneath horses. And I would be putting Notorious in those bets for sure. And then the one that to me is 20-1. I would not have made 20-1. Here is the value horse in the race. Might not go off at 20-1, but if he isn't going to be a short price, since Cogburn, we all know, is going to get pretty heavier, but that's Isavunga.
I hope you try it.
From South Africa. This is a really good horse. A Grand Motion is another trainer I trust. He's a Breeders' Cup winning, Kentucky Derby winning trainer. He knows a good horse when he's got one. I go back to when I was first in Southern California. Charlie Whittingham, I bring him up again, had a really good horse from South Africa called Bold Tropic. And he was one of the top older turf horses on the Southern California circuit. And there's been Ippy Tombo was another top one that came to the United States from South Africa. So, I mean, they can come up with good horses. And it looks like this is one. So he's very good, especially at 20-1 on the morning line, throwing in those underneath slots. But would I be putting him on one of my pick 3, pick 4, pick 5, whatever? No. One horse, Cogburn. And I think I'll be shocked if he's not posing for pictures after this year's Breeders' Cup Turf Sprint. I will be not surprised. I will be shocked.
I hope you're right. That is my favorite horse. So I love that horse. Quick story on Cogburn, why I love him. When he was a 2-year-old, I kind of know a few people in the Asmussen camp, and they said this is his best, no doubt. And he runs as a 3-year-old. He doesn't debut for a while. He's very average because he had a good first race, and then he was kind of average. I said, those liars, and then I was so pissed off. And then he comes back, and it's like, you know what? Yeah, he was his best. They just had to get him on the right surface and everything. So super excited. And like you said, if you were there that day, holy cow. Heather was with us, and Heather said, you're raving about this horse like a lunatic. And I said, it was that good. Like, I just had never seen anything like it. So
yeah, from a guy that was that was smart enough to pick against him, me, and pick and pick Star of Mystery to beat him that day. I felt like the guy off of Sham's connections off of the movie Secretariat. Whenever, like, as the Secretariat's going down the stretch, he's kind of like, yeah, and he's just like, oh shit, like he ain't ever getting there, And then he just became a fan of rooting for Cogburn the whole way around. And what's funny is that feels like a lifetime ago. He's only ran one time since then. because they had the issue with the weather and they kept scratching. And so, you mentioned it, John, a second ago that he's fresh. He's ran once since that day.
Yep.
And that was in beginning of June 8th. And he's ran once. And that was September 7th. So you talk about a fresh horse. He is going to be lightning fresh and lightning fast here. So they're going to have their running shoes on to get to him.
Well, another thing about Brad Sell, listen, he's had a pretty tough campaign, actually, and is going to have to ship all the way from Europe for this to run against a fresh Cogburn.
Yeah.
So, to me, and again, it's a race, so anything can happen. Manowar got beat once, Secretariat got beat 5 times. Listen, I mean, Seattle Slew got upset in the swap stakes. I mean, it can happen. But that's why I'll be shocked if Cogburn, I mean, as good as Brad Sell is, like I say, I think he just picked the wrong year and the wrong horse to be trying to take on in this spot, especially when he hasn't even raced around a turn yet. I mean, that's not exactly, what you're licking your chops for to try to beat Cogburn when you haven't. And they say they feel confident he'll go around a turn. He probably will. Mm-hmm. But I know how well Cogburn goes around a turn. That day that you guys saw him, how good did he go around the turn that day?
Pretty damn good.
Wow. I mean, it went from, oh man, he's going too fast to holy shit, look at this.
And so when we were standing kind of right where he got going again, because I picked him and bet him, and I was telling the guys, I was sick about it, John, because I thought he's going too fast. And like you said before that race, he really wasn't a speed demon. He would came from way out of it at Lone Star, or he would just be a little bit off the pace. And I wanted to throw up, and those reins were as loose as they could be. And Irad just pumped him once, and he took off. And that's when I was like, now that you better keep that in your memory, because that doesn't happen.
That's right.
Anyway, yeah.
Well, you guys remind me, the way you're discussing this is very, very, very similar to the 1973 Belmont Stakes that Secretariat ran, the greatest race in the history of American racing. And here's a horse that people were saying he's by bold ruler, so he can't win the 1.25 mile Kentucky Derby. He doesn't have enough stamina. But he was out of a Prince Quillo mare. Sham was out of a Prince Quillo mare. And Prince Quillo was a tremendous source of stamina in American breeding. But Secretariat in this Belmont is going head and head with Sham. And they're running fractions for like a sprint. They run the first 3 quarters in 9 and change. And the people in the press box at Belmont Park that know racing and see the fractions go up, and they're going, that idiot, Ron Turcotte, you can't win the Belmont State. And remember, they didn't think this horse had the stamina to win the Derby at a mile and a quarter. Now he's going 1.5 miles, and they're running 109 and change, and he's in a duel. And, well, we saw what you guys are discussing, seeing Cogburn find another gear, come down the stretch, and here's Secretariat, moving like a tremendous machine and winning by 31 lengths and annihilating the track record that had been set by Gallant Man all those years before in the 50s. And I mean, so the way you guys are discussing having witnessed Cogburn, and of course, it's a much different thing. There was a 25-year Triple Crown drought for Secretariat. I picked him in my high school paper that he would win the Triple Crown. And people were like, no, we might never see another Triple Crown winner, which was the situation prior to American Pharoah. So you guys experienced what a drought like that can be. That was a 37-year drought there. But the 25-year drought, they were saying, oh, the foal crops are too high and this and that. And then we got Secretariat, Seattle Slew, and Affirm, bang, bang, bang. So, but the way you guys discuss how you felt and what you were seeing and what you experienced is so similar to those of us that watched that 1973 Belmont Stakes. By the way, one other tidbit about that Belmont, how great that performance was by Secretariat. Jack Nicklaus was sitting in his den watching that race on his television and stood up all by himself. He recounted this later and gave Secretariat a standing ovation, applauding for Secretariat as he came down the stretch that day to win by 31 lengths. Maybe the greatest golfer, it's either Nicklaus or Tiger Woods, but standing up to give one of our greatest horses this standing ovation as Secretariat won that day.
That's cool.
That's pretty insane, really.
Yeah. That's cool.
Well, let's see if do we have another secretariat in our hands? That's my best segue I got there.
Yeah, real good job there, buddy.
Yeah, well, I don't think we do. But we listen. You got the Breeders' Cup Juvenile is the last one we'll do here on Friday. This is race number 9 on Friday at Del Mar. And listen, you do have a field of 10, and half the field is undefeated. It's a really insane field when you think about it in that regard. And not to mention, you've got Chancellor McPatrick on the outside. You got East Avenue on the inside. Your top two choices. Oh, and by the way, you got that guy, Bob Baffert, with a few in here at big prices who gaming hasn't lost either. It just has a lot of layers, this race. Shouldn't Believe is a horse from Japan that's getting a lot of action or a lot of interest. So you have the two horses, like the two main horses, but if you don't want to pick those, there's like really, there's so many different options to go.
Well, you're right, Jared. Absolutely. This is one of the best juveniles we've seen in a long time in terms of the depth of the quality, at least as it appears right now. And I can't get away from East Avenue. I mean, he's just been too impressive. Those two races, both of his so far, are just, to me, you watch him and you go, how is anybody going to beat that horse? I mean, I can't picture it. I just can't. So to me, he is the horse to beat and the horse I can't pick against. Now, that said, I think Ferocious is very interesting in here at a price. A horse that's been hammered on the board and looks so good in his debut. But I think he's had legitimate excuses in his last 2 races. And so I think he's got the capability of jumping up with a good effort here. Is it good enough to beat East Avenue? I don't know. I don't know if his best is even good enough the way East Avenue has looked. So to me, those are the two I like the best. Of course, Chancellor McPatrick deserves a lot of respect, but I don't like his running style for Del Mar. Del Mar is a speed favoring-ish or speed favoring a lot oval. And this summer, it really was. We won't get a lot of racing, before the juvenile on Friday. We get 1 day of racing at Del Mar to kind of see how the track's playing. But even Del Mar has never been a track that is good for on the main track, horses coming from way back. And Chancellor McPatrick's very talented. He kind of reminds me, at least in his running style, of how Secretariat was as a 2-year-old. Secretariat early in his career, he got absolutely annihilated leaving the starting gate in his first start on July 4th, 1972. And, then ended up going on to become the 2-year-old champion. But even late in the year as a 2-year-old, I think he got, again, mentally coming out of the gate, he got slaughtered so badly that he just would come out hesitantly out of the gate. But he was so talented, it didn't matter. I mean, look, in the Kentucky Derby, he ran every quarter of a mile faster than the preceding quarter. I mean, it's like a horse that just keeps getting stronger and stronger. And by the way, City of Troy, that's kind of what Aidan O'Brien, how he describes him, just to kind of take a quick look back to that race. It's one of the points that I don't think people are putting enough attention into, that Aidan O'Brien feels like this horse, he's got tactical speed, but he gets stronger and stronger and stronger as the race goes on. So that's kind of a scary thought again, especially if you remember that Charlie Whittingham says a turf horse's best dirt race usually is their first dirt race. Mm-hmm. But as far as Chancellor McPatrick, I mean, he's going to have the possibility of traffic trouble, and then, not the longest stretch that we have in American racing, and trying to catch some really good horses. So I respect him. I can see him possibly winning. I can certainly see him hitting the board, but I like East Avenue and Ferocious better. And then, Jared, you mentioned Baffert. Gaming has certainly got the credentials to win this. I mean, he's by a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner. His dam's by a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner. Well, it could be he's a Breeders' Cup Juvenile winner. I mean, it's in his bloodlines. It's in his blood. But I like, of the Baffert horses, Citizen Bull best. He's been very highly regarded over there at that Baffert barn from day one. So much so he was the favorite in the Del Mar Futurity. And, he didn't run well that day, but he sure took a big step forward next time out in the American Pharaoh. And I think that's a horse with a lot of upside. So I think he's dangerous in this spot. So, but look, East Avenue to me, my goodness. I mean, he's been so impressive. And, you know, it was so sad what happened with Maxfield when he came in here. And I think he was poised to run a big race and ended up having to scratch. But East Avenue, he looks like he's the real deal to me so far. And I just find it hard trying to beat him with anybody, quite frankly.
Well, let me put a scenario out there, and like, so the fact that you do have two horses for well, three, but two out in the Citizen Bull and Gaming, who probably based on the odds alone are his two biggest shot or best shots. He's drawn Getaway Car, who we know will want to go to the lead or be very close. East Avenue obviously has done that. Do you think there's a scenario where it's like, hey, Bob's like, Hernandez, just go, like, put as much pressure as you can on East Avenue, and on top of that, there's a couple in here. Jonathan's Way as well, a horse that won Gate to Wire last time, although he is one from off of it as well. But there is plenty of speed that looks to be on here that could, especially with that two Getaway Car, where you think it could soften it up a little bit for whether it be Gaming, whether it be Citizen Bull, or even if you want to be crazy and say, hey, maybe it's maybe the track bias isn't going to be enough to keep Chance McPatrick out of the winner's circle.
Well, again, and I think Ferocious is one that if that scenario were to unfold, he could be sitting there in a very good spot. And look, he's a horse that in his debut, he kind of reminded me of what I talk about, a real great way of going and a long stride, but a long stride that's, with a beautiful way of going. And I think circumstances in his next two starts have prevented him from looking like he did in that debut where he got a 96 buyer. And see, a 96 buyer, what if he runs back to that race right there? Yeah. That tells you. So that's why I think I came very close to putting him on top. But East Avenue, the scenario you're talking about, Jared, I don't think it matters with him if he's the horse he looks to be, this East Avenue. Somebody could go with Getaway Car or anybody else. To me, it isn't like East Avenue has looked like a runoff early in the race. He's just good and shows early speed. There's some horses that you see that they tear away from there and they're full of run and they're like rank and they grab the bit. And those are the horses that tend to be more vulnerable in terms of a pace, negative that could get them beat. East Avenue has looked very, and his trainer, Walsh, is a guy that he, I'm sure in the morning has had him behind horses and whatever. I mean, I think he can sit off the pace. I'd be shocked if he couldn't do that. And the way he just came home in his debut and the way he came home last time, I mean, he just looks like a runner.
Yeah.
Sometimes in racing, we get try to make things so complicated. All the figures and this and the numbers and all this gobbledygook. And sometimes you just he's a really good horse. And East Avenue to me looks like he's just a really good horse. And I think Chancer McPatrick's a very good horse. But with his running style, I think he's up against it in this particular situation. Maybe down the line for Chancer McPatrick, when we get onto the first Saturday in May at 1.25 miles, there's maybe a good chance, or at least there's a chance that Chancer McPatrick would be the one you'd want more at 1.25 miles, as long as he could be first or second with 1/8 of a mile to go in my strike system. But, this is a case where maybe in the long term it's Chancer McPatrick. But for this race at this distance coming up this Saturday, Friday in the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, I have to feel that how in the world is Chancer McPatrick going to catch East Avenue? Now, if Chancer McPatrick does that, boy, what does that tell you about how good he really is? I mean, he would be an exciting horse going into the next year for the Triple Crown Trail. And by the way, you guys mentioned something about this recently on Blinkers Off, and I want to also mention it today, because we've been suffering through this for the past few years. And it's so great to have this off our shoulders. But Bob Baffert can earn Kentucky Derby points here in this Breeders' Cup Juvenile race. We don't have that stupid thing that we've been having to deal with. And it's just great to have that behind us.
Yeah, I mean it's only our biggest race, so why of the whole year, the Kentucky Derby, and then we got guys running in it that can earn points, running all these prep races, and yeah, it's just crazy. And I agree, it would be like if let's just say the Kansas City Chiefs can't go to the Super Bowl, but they can play in all the other games.
Yeah,
It's like,
that's
well,
a great example. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, well, what in the hell are we doing? What does it matter, right?
Yeah.
So,
Oh, they can
But
play in the AFC Championship, but they
Yeah,
just can't make it to
yeah.
the Super Bowl. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, okay.
right.
But I'm surprised we didn't see Jared faint when you're trying to tell him that Kansas City Chiefs can't be in the Super Bowl. I mean, it might be one of those like where they stab themselves to death if that were the case with Kansas City.
That's we're not used to hearing that lately,
Right.
So, one last thing to say about this race, and it's from if you guys have seen the 14 trends to the Breeders' Cup I do every year, it is available on the site. If you do buy the betting Bible, it is included for free, but I'll give this one out. It's 8 of the last 9 winners of this race have gone on to run in the Kentucky Derby, and the only one that didn't do it was he got hurt, right? Corniche. And so it's just one of those races that produces really quality horses. So to that point, you love East Avenue, that you got to assume, moving forward, this is a legit, because like you said, you got Derby points on the line here. It leads to all roads lead to the Kentucky Derby. You got to think he's a legit horse.
Well, I think that he is. I think Chancellor McPatrick is, and I think Ferocious might very well be too. Again, with his long stride, I think there are still some big wins in the future for Ferocious here. So, but that's a great point, Jared. I mean, in terms of, and I think that this particular Breeders' Cup Juvenile is stronger, again, in terms of the depth of the quality than basically anyone we've seen in years.
Yep.
So when you talk about that, so many of them, the winners have gone on to run in the Kentucky Derby, there's, to me, even a better chance of this year, because whoever wins this race against this field, you're talking about a real quality racehorse. There's no question about it. I mean, this is too good of a race that like I say, if Chancellor McPatrick can rally on this Del Mar surface and win it, what does that say about him, for Pete's sake? And East Avenue, what if he wins this thing by 5 or 6, drilling this field? I mean, he'll be one of the most exciting horses we will have in recent years. I mean, we're talking about, look, American Pharoah wasn't even undefeated as a 2-year-old and ended up winning the Triple Crown. Justify didn't even run as a 2-year-old. And yet we would have a horse with 3, just outstanding performances in East Avenue. If he were to come up with another brilliant performance here, I mean, he would be so exciting. And like I say, I think this Fierceness is a horse that is certainly one that you really can't, Ferocious, I should say, is a horse that I still would not give up on just yet. We're going to learn a lot about Ferocious in this race, I think, because this is kind of a put up or shut up. Either he's the horse that they were saying into and out of his debut. Don't forget, they paid a lot of money for him. So there's been high expectations. And like I say, I've watched him closely, and I'm willing to draw a line. It's tough to draw a line through more than one race, because then you start saying, well, there's a saying in racing, a really good horse doesn't need an excuse. But look, as I mentioned, Secretariat got beat 5 times. So, I mean, it isn't like all our great horses were undefeated. Fierceness was, I mean, he was one of the greats we'll ever see. But as I say, American Pharoah wasn't. Justify was, but he didn't run a lot. But and Zenyatta, was darn close to being perfect. And when you think of what she accomplished with her style, see, that's the Chancellor McPatrick style, and yet she won 19 in a row. That's mind-boggling. That not once in those races some kind of traffic trouble or something got her beat. It came close a few times. And then, of course, in that final start, she did barely lose in a photo, but one of the all-time greats. And, this Breeders' Cup Juvenile really stacks up. I think if you're a racing fan, and the thing about all of us, we're already kind of with an eye toward the Kentucky Derby next year. They've got the first Kentucky Derby future pool wager opening. And I've done real well in that, because one of the biggest bets each year I make is all others. And I'm not as eager to bet that this year because I think there's a better chance this year than in most years that the Kentucky Derby winner might come out of the Breeders' Cup Juvenile because of the strength of this race this year.
Yeah, I think you're right. You're talking about Ferocious, and the reason why I like East Avenue so much is because I was still pretty high on Ferocious that last race, and I thought Ferocious ran well, John, in that race and got smoked, and that's
smoked.
So I was like, I don't
smoked,
know. Yeah,
just completely smoked.
Yeah,
I mean, we've got a big gap to close here. There's no getting around it. That's why I'd love to be a wise guy and say, and pick Ferocious.
Yeah.
Because he's going to be a decent price. But you got to go with your eyes. I mean, to me, it isn't that hard. As I say, this isn't that complicated. This East Avenue to me looks like a runner, a real star. He's got that look to him. And this is the problem with the Kentucky Derby these days versus when, again, I was young. When I was young, these horses like Secretariat, he was the horse of the year as a 2-year-old that had a robust 2-year-old campaign. Affirmed had a robust, 2-year-old campaign. So when we got to the Kentucky Derby, these horses had made 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 starts. Nowadays, we're seeing horses 3, 4, 5 starts. I mean, so we really don't know as much about these horses as we did back in the day. And it makes the Kentucky Derby, which is always tough, even trickier today because we don't have as much form, as many past performances to sink our teeth into these days. So, Like I say, the Derby is always tough, and especially with 20 horses and the luck of the draw and so on and so forth. So, and look at poor Forever Young this year, the poor guy. So, so many times the horse that you turn it, that it ends up being the best 3-year-old does not win the Kentucky Derby. The best 3-year-old colt does not win the Kentucky Derby in many, many years. But yet we're trying to pick that winner and more importantly, bet on that winner. So, and we want to bet on these winners at this year's Breeders' Cup. So like I say, to review, for those who tuned in late, I do for the betting Bible have long shots picked 1-2 in the juvenile turf. I have a long shot picked on top in the filly Ameriturf. And I have long shots picked 1-2 in the dirt mile. And all it takes is one of those to help make your, not just day, but your Breeders' Cup weekend, both days. If you can somehow use a horse at a really nice price and use that to your advantage as a horse player.
That's right. Yep. Absolutely. Well, I got to ask you one more question, not horse races related. We got to wrap it up here. I got work to do, but I got to know, as a guy who was at game 2 of the World Series and very much enjoyed game 3, is it going to be a sweep? Do the Dodgers get it done tonight and end it?
I'm a little torn on that, to be honest, because I really feel the Yankees are such a good team that it's hard to envision them being swept. But by the same token, I've seen that the Dodgers, when they get on a good run, they're capable of putting together a pretty good winning streak. So 4 isn't like, way out of whack.
Yeah.
And I like the pitching matchup for game 4. I don't like it's a bullpen game for the Dodgers, but that's actually done pretty well for the Dodgers. The most important aspect of the pitching matchup is I think the Yankee starter is vulnerable in this spot. The Dodgers are very good at hitting sliders and sinkers, and this is a slider sinker pitcher. And the Dodgers have been like in the top 2 in those 2 categories in hitting. So when you see how well one of the impressive aspects of the Dodgers is that they've won the first 3 games and Ohtani's done basically nothing.
Yep.
I mean, that shows you the depth and the quality of this Dodger team, because most teams look at what's happening with Judge having a bad World Series, and it's hurting the Yankees. But the fact that Ohtani is not having what you would expect from him necessarily in the World Series, and yet the Dodgers are up 3-0. They've been hitting that ball. So, I mean, it's a good hitting club. And, obviously the Yankee bullpen has been a little on the shaky side too. And I found that out firsthand through the year on a number of occasions that Yankee bullpen isn't the most reliable bullpen that we have in baseball. And that's another plus for the Dodgers. They have a very strong. Now the thing is, the whole bullpen's pitching tonight. I would have preferred having an actual starter for this game because that helped in Game 3. That Buehler, we got to see closer to the real Buehler coming back from his second Tommy John surgery. So, and I've said it before, I really feel sorry for whoever that doctor was that operated on Tommy John, because I don't know who it was. And that guy came up with one of the most important operations in athletic history, and all we do is call it after the pitcher who had his arm operated on, Tommy John. So whoever you are, Mr. Doctor, I feel sorry for you because you did a great thing, and yet you get virtually no credit for it.
Okay, so non-related, but the chat is blowing us up with random questions to ask you, John. So I'm gonna ask you anyway, just to shut them up. All right, first one. Halloween is approaching. What's your favorite Halloween candy?
Oh, that's a good one.
You're welcome.
Yeah,
Kevin.
I'd say Snickers.
Snickers. Solid.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And second question. This is a new one to the chat here. With wings, are you a wings guy? You like wings?
Actually, not.
Kevin, don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah. Okay.
The question was blue cheese or ranch with wings. So you can't really answer that then.
No.
I say neither.
I will say I prefer ranch with like a salad or whatever. So I would be a ranch guy.
Okay.
I'm a neither, Kevin. So there's that. So
there was one. Would you rather go to Applebee's or Chili's?
I would say Matt Denny's.
I agree. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
The also eligible.
If I had to pick between those two, I would give the edge to Applebee's.
Ooh, I think I'd do Chili's, but it's close.
It's close.
Neither one are very good.
I don't know the last time I went to either one of those places, to be honest.
You know,
me neither.
Yeah, well, I do because my wife, for whatever reason, likes Chili's, so we go from now and then. Yeah.
Well, no wonder you said Chili's. You're smart.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. I know who the boss is around here, so.
Well, it's I think Kevin, you can thank Kevin, or Kevin, you can thank me later for getting those questions asked. So, John, any final thoughts lasting into next couple of days as we get to the Breeders' Cup?
Well, I would say this is kind of a recommendation, only kind of learn the hard way. You know, there's so many good races and it's so easy to get, carried away. And I try to be real methodical, just take it easy. Don't be betting heavy right away. Try to pace yourself. And more than anything, try to find a horse or two or three and really key into that. Like for me, it would be Cogburn. So, I would build things around Cogburn. But also don't forget to just bet a horse. In other words, Cogburn, yes, he's not going to be a great price. But through the years, I've had my best Breeders' Cups when I have 2-3 horses I really like and make large win wagers on them. And then play around with maybe the pick 5, pick 6 a little bit. But the main thing is, don't be worried about trying to take home, a lottery type win, because the Breeders' Cup can really, like I say, I learned the hard way. I had some very disappointing Breeders' Cup financially, and I learned that you just got to kind of pace yourself. And like I say, for instance, I had a really great Breeders' Cup that year. That was at Santa Anita a few years ago. And I had 2-3 horses that I really liked, and I bet them all heavy, and they all won. And, I didn't need to be hitting pick 5s, pick 6s. That was good enough. So, it just, like I say, and certainly if I were looking for some help, the Betting Bible, honestly, you guys put so much effort into this, and you guys are accountable. You come up afterwards and say, hey, we did well, this was a disappointing one, whatever. But you guys are accountable, which is good. You don't just throw this out there and then forget it. And I know that you guys aren't just casual, this isn't a theory operation for you guys, theoretical operation for you guys. You guys are investing yourselves, your hard-earned money. And that's what counts, because like when I've made the morning line, I pay attention to, like for races, a big race, to what maybe people are picking or how people are talking. But what carries even more weight to me is if you look at, like, for instance, how the betting is in Europe, because those are actual bookmakers taking actual money. And people will act differently if they have to put up their money than if they're just saying, oh, I like that horse, or I think, whatever. It's different when you're backing your opinion with dollars. So, that's the thing about the breed. And what's great about the Breeders' Cup is, more than any time during our entire year, or at least as good as maybe Kentucky Derby Day and maybe Belmont Stakes Day, we have so many good races and so many ways you can go and many ways you can bet. And that's why I say you can get a little overwhelmed. So try to keep it simple, but try to, stay within yourselves, and you'll find you'll have a lot more success that way.
Yeah, it's such there's no day that's more of a example than the Breeders' Cup, that you have to go in with a plan. You got and you can't chase, because and there's so many times where you can be so right and so wrong in the same race. You can have the right opinion. You knew that a favorite was weak, and your horse ran second, and you're like, all right, but like, it takes one. The odds and the values are so good all day that, I look at last year at Saturday, I was so hot the first 3 or 4 Breeders' Cup races. I mean, I couldn't miss, and I made a killing. And then I pretty much ice cold after that. But guess what? I had my plan already in place. I still was very, very profitable for the day. But though, if I would have chased, if I would have kept, then they could have got out of hand. So the point of that is you got, and the same way it goes if you're really cold to start off. It takes you getting the one race right, So you got to go in with a plan. Don't go behind, beyond your means. And have those strong opinions, like you said. If Cog burns early in the day, well, so be it. Cog burns early in the day.
That's right.
Yep. Well said.
And like you say, have a plan. And listen, you don't have to make a plan and stick 100. I know how it works. We're human, so I mean, I understand. But have a plan, and just try to kind of use that as a guide, so you don't get carried away. Like I say, believe me, I've been to Breeders' Cups where you use the word chase, and I mean, all of a sudden you lose a couple bets here or there, and all of a sudden, there's Breeders' Cups I've made one bet in. I'll give you an example. Bayakoa, when unfortunately Go for One broke down, but I bet Bayakoa big that day, and believe me, a lot of people think Go for One was going to win. I'm not going to say she wasn't, but I hadn't given up yet by any stretch of the imagination. But I made one bet at the 1988 Breeders' Cup. It was a filly called Personal Ensign. I bet her huge because I felt she was not going to get beat because she'd never been beaten, and I didn't expect this to be the first time. And I will tell you, as they came down to the finish line, I thought, only I can beat Personal Ensign, because here's Winning Colors, and yet that Personal Ensign, as game a performance as you're ever going to see, sticks that nose in front right there and beats Gary Stevens and Winning Colors. And I mean, and of course, Personal Ensign was a heavy favorite, but I had a profitable Breeders' Cup because I bet enough on her that even though she was a heavy favorite, I did pretty well that day. But boy, I would have liked so many tickets at the 16th hole. I will tell you that for sure. But that's part of what is the fun of this too. Those are memories etched in your mind forever.
Yep.
I can tell you where I was sitting. I was sitting in the Santa Anita press box, and they have a press box kitchen area with a table, and they had a TV there, and I was watching that race right there and thinking, how is Personal Ensign can't win this race? There's no way. And yet she dug down deep and won. And so when people talk about that as one of the great moments in racing history, which it is, it's also one of the great personal moments for me, because she made it a winning Breeders' Cup. And she's, they have the saying, she snatched victory out of the jaws of defeat. And boy, she really did. All you got to do is go back to YouTube and watch that race, because like I say, If you look at where they were at the 16 pole, you're not betting Personal Ensign. And Goodbye Halo ran a really good race, trained by the great Charlie Whittingham in that race that finished third. She was a really nice filly in her own right, 3-year-old filly like Winning Colors.
Well, it's just it like you said, we all have those races. We all have those. A lot of them are from the Breeders' Cup for me as well. So,
Yeah.
it's such a great year. It's it like I said at the beginning, it's definitely one of those years that I mean, and again, you might have a star like Flightline because we don't know what City of Troy is yet. We'll find if he goes and romps here and wins by 5, you're like, oh shit, like this is right up there with the Flightline.
East Avenue.
Yeah.
I mean,
East Avenue.
and who knows what he goes on to do, right? We might look back and say, wow, East Avenue was unbelievable. Like that was such a star in the making that day. So, and just top to bottom, the fields are fantastic. We'll have all our picks in the betting Bible. John will have his picks in the betting Bible. John, as always, everyone, it's no surprise. Everyone loves when you're on, and it's fantastic, and we appreciate it. So let's do this again soon, right?
Sounds good, guys.
All right. Thanks, John.
See you, John.
Jon White, folks. Listen, that's
Yep.
I mean,
The greatest.
I don't know why. I mean, I'm not surprised, but it's like every time we do one of these, I'm like, oh, no, he killed it again.
Yep. Two superstars, John and Tracy. Tracy with a great job saving the day there, getting it back going. So yeah, it was awesome. Totally awesome.
Well, guys, listen, Kevin, that's why they pay me the big bucks. I just you find those ways to maneuver through, whether it be interviews or dealing with Halterman's ass on it when we do the blinkers off.
Yeah, exactly. Come on.
Yeah, I know. No. Listen, I'm legitimately, and I'm not just saying this. I always am to find out who John likes. Every time he did his column, I want to see who likes in the Breeders' Cup, but I'm like itching to find out who he's got picked in these races. So I know everyone else is too.
I really, really enjoyed the breakdown of City of Troy. I knew he would come with some really good stuff on that because he's been following and waiting for this horse to try the dirt. So I thought that breakdown was great. I felt very relieved when he said he wanted to talk about the turf sprint. I thought, oh no, he might have some like a long shot or something. And when he said Cogburn was his most likely winner, I was like, okay, good, because that is the horse that I want to win. So I thought the breakdown of the turf was really good as well. Listen, every breakdown was good. If you're just joining us, hit rewind, go back and listen. But the classic especially, I thought was fantastic.
Someone picking gaming, me, is a little concerned about the East Avenue. I to be fair, I mean I'll be using East Avenue, but for hearing those comments about how much he likes East Avenue, I'm like, all right, I might have to make sure I use him on top in multiple tickets.
Well, I'll tell you this, Jared, he made a great point at the end about memories and making memories. And you and I, and certainly John and Tracy as well, they've been in it longer than us, obviously, but we've all been in it a long time now. And most, I would say, of our, and for you as well, outside of your children, obviously, but most of your personal memories outside of your kids have come at the racetrack. And how about gaming? As I sit here with my Emerald Downs shirt on, we all three sat there and watched his debut in August at Emerald Downs. If he wins the Breeders' Cup Juvenile, that is something the three of us will talk about our entire rest of our lives, right? So it's hard not for you and for even for me. I didn't put him on top, to be honest, but I'm going to use him because I remember that so well, and I remember how impressed we all were, right? So
yeah,
that kind of, John's real good about tying things back, and that kind of, you're talking about gaming kind of made me tie that back to, that is a memory we'll always are going to remember if gaming, whether it wins, whether he wins the Breeders' Cup or goes on to win a big race, we're all three going to talk about that. So anyway.
Well, it's just like we were talking about there at the end of it, where it's like, you remember, where, I remember sitting at the OTB with you and Zenyatta, was trying to run down St. Trinian's, and we never thought she would get there. And just like with that, it's like, well, I'll always remember sitting in Emerald Downs in the grandstands there in the box and watching gaming run that race, right? And so, especially if he goes on to, win here or win the Derby, or whatever. So, it all, like, I think that's the biggest thing we'll leave with horse racing is yes, we're all here trying to make some money. Hopefully we all do. Hopefully the betting Bible absolutely kills it. But you can look back every single year at the Breeders' Cup in particular and be like, that was like, I remember what I felt. I remember what I was doing when Flightline crew, when Pratt looked back on Flightline,
Yeah.
you're like, oh, hell, we're about to see something insane right now. And
Yep.
so all those memories, when Pharaoh won the Classic that year, Goldacova, all those years back when, so there's always those horses and regardless, like I don't remember how much money I made on Goldacova, but I remember like how insane that was when she won 3 in a row.
Well, and you talk about the specific details, and you just said one that I will never ever forget. And that was when Flavian Pratt looked back, and we looked at each other with a, oh my God, this horse has been running right up there with Life is Good. He just put him away like he was a gnat. By the way, Life is Good was elite, and he just put him away. And he's got so much horse still after doing that nobody knows nobody's going to catch him. And it's like I'm getting chills just talking about it, because that was kind of the moment for those of us that had followed the horse and kind of follow horse racing. We knew, oh my God, like this is going to be that otherworldly performance that you hope you see every Breeders' Cup. But you kind of knew going into that one, you had a chance to really see something special. So yeah, that was a great moment. I'll never forget that either.
Enable cruising down the middle of that turf track, just running away with it, just like, oh my gosh.
But I'll tell you, you're bringing up another. My goodness, we have some great memories. But the one memory I'll take away from that, because we were there with Kelly von Hemel was with us, and Kelly's a very mild manner individual. I would describe him as and he was like, it was almost like he was just like us, a fan that day when Enable ran. And I remember looking at him, and his eyes were just bright, and it's like, wow, like that really was something special.
Well, I'll tell you what, and like we not only have we been around Aiden O'Brien, we had a conversation with Aiden O'Brien, like a 30-minute conversation prior to the freaking Kentucky Derby. His first, when he had trying to win with middle. I mean, literally, me, you, and Slim were in the tunnel at Churchill Downs while it's raining before Justify. I mean, all like that sounds like a dream I had last night. And we're talking to Aiden O'Brien about all the different things, and I'll tell you this, and it's seeing Gosden that day in the paddock before Enable. It was like it felt like you were seeing like a Mick Jagger or something. Like just this rock star that you're just like, this guy, like this the way his mannerisms. That's nothing. Obviously, Aiden O'Brien's the man, but he's that guy, right? And so when he brings a horse over like her or like this year, like that's one I love that dude, and when he brings horses over, they're legit horses.
It was bizarre with Aiden O'Brien that day because, look, I mean, we are incredibly lucky that we've been around a lot of trainers from the United States that are very good at, but they kind of become, when you go to the big events, you see them a lot, or you go to any track, you see them. And with him, it was like, that was one of those times you're like, oh my God, that's Aiden O'Brien. And so Slim was like, let's just go talk to him. And I'm like, well, what do we have to lose? Like, he's never going to know who we were after this conversation. And you're right. One of the nicest guys I've ever met. And we were, we weren't asking anything crazy, but we were just kind of shooting the shit with him about the Derby, like an hour before it's getting ready to run. And it's like, this is trippy right now. So anyway, that
probably one of his most anticipated races, for him personally, he wants to win the Derby so bad. Middleton obviously didn't run well that day, but going into that race was, that was his second choice.
Well, and to tie back to something that John said that's going to help with City of Troy, and it was a really good comment, Mendelssohn didn't get out of the gate that day, and he lost all hope right out of the gate. And that contributed, there's been others, I'm sure, that contributed to the fact that they now have an American starting gate over there that, hey, if we've got horses that are going to go to the United States, let's get them in this starting gate. And so, again, Mendelssohn was one that, incredible horse, right? Went on to have a great career, had a great career before and a great career after, but that damn gate got him beat basically. Well, I don't know if he would have been justified, but that gate gave him where he had no chance, because he broke horrible, and that was it.
And this is it. Final thing I'm going to say, because which makes me super interested in Forever Young, because all those things happened to him in the Derby, and he still almost won, you know? And that's why when I left that race, I was against him in that race. And when I left that race, I was like, oh my gosh, like everything that I was right. Everything I was worried about happened. You know, he didn't break. He didn't like the, you know, he had traffic issues and dirt kickback and all that. And he still ran an unbelievable race. And that's when I was like, oh shit, this is like a real horse, you know? And obviously, so to tie that all together, it's like, yeah, he kind of has shown one, he's got the, you know, which we alluded to a little bit. He's got the form over here and he's proven that he can do it even when things don't go his way.
I couldn't have said it better myself. And I'll give you a little teaser. You can go to YouTube right now, look at my classic preview, and you can see if I agree with Jared. You could go, or if you don't want to watch that, you could wait till Thursday and we'll talk about it on Blinkers Off some more, or go get the betting Bible and it'll be out tomorrow morning and you can see our thoughts there as well.
So many ways to see who we like.
So many activities.
So many ways. All right, guys, that's all the time we have. Make sure you go to the website at racingdudes.com. Click that Get Racing Dudes Premium button and go grab that betting Bible. Again, Jon White will have all top four plays from every race, not just the Breeders' Cup, but every race running on Friday and Saturday at Del Mar. Him, as long as us, will have top four plays for every race. So if you want, you know, he obviously teased that as what some of his, we don't even know who some of his plays are, those long shots. So make sure you go get that. You get the 14 trends to the betting Bible. Get that as well. For free. So make sure you go check that out, racingdudes.com. Again, we will be live again on Thursday, Blinkers Off, doing kind of our regular show. We'll have a little bit more coverage on different Breeders' Cup races, talking about the Classic again, tons of things. So if you missed that conversation, rewind it, but also go or wait until we come back live. We're on Twitter at Race_Dudes. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. Make sure you go hit that like, subscribe, and notification bell on YouTube for Racing Dudes so you get alerted when we do have those future videos. We'll be live on Friday and Saturday during the Breeders' Cup as well. So if you're just hanging out at home watching the races, jump on there and kind of interact with us, and we'll bet together, and we'll hopefully win and lose some together, whatever it is. We'll have fun. Yeah. It's going to be a hell of a time, man.
Oh, I can't wait. In a lot of ways, I'm glad we're home because we can be with everybody, you know, and those lives are always fun. We've never been live for a Breeders' Cup before because we've always been there. So to be at home, I think that's the silver lining to it, no doubt. I can't wait.
Kevin, I'll touch on this more on the next show, but yes, I'll get it on Thursday. I have a Super Bowl ring. I have the ring. I will wear it on the show. Okay. Yeah. Falcons not upset. The Falcons
not upset. Come on.
Okay. They covered 27-7. 27-7.
Yep.
The flag football champions for the second grade, whatever. 7-7. We the Dolphins scored on the very first play of the game, went down 0-7 real quick. We got things back together. We tied it up on the next drive, went to halftime, tied at 7-7. And they, class carried on. Like we say, class is class, right?
Well, you missed the break and you still recovered and were able to win. That's class.
We missed the break real hard. I believe that each ring is worth $10,000 is what I was told.
That's what I've heard the value is. Yeah.
I've already pawned mine off. The boys keep asking me where my rings are. I was like, I don't know. I can't find it. I'm getting money for to bet this weekend, the Breeders' Cup. Oh man. All right, guys, that's gonna do it for us. We gotta get back to handicapping. We appreciate everybody tuning in here for 2 hours, and appreciate John's time as well. Until next time, guys, I'm Jared Welch. He's Aaron Halterman. We'll see you later this week on another edition of Blinkers Off.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Blinkers Off. Join our horse racing community at racingdudes.com and follow us on Twitter at racing_dudes. Want to make money betting horses? Bet with the Racing Dudes.